Hello, I'm Cat, and welcome back to the A to Z of geography. Today, for the letter G, we're going to be making an exception to the most populated country rule to talk about somewhere that soon might literally not exist. One of their neighbors is threatening to gobble them up, and it's not, generic war discourse where you say, we might do something bad to you. It is literally that Guyana has had one of its neighbors vote on whether they should annex them. And it's not just that they're holding a vote, which is wild by itself to hold a referendum on annexing your neighbor, but it's even wilder because 95% of the people who are asked voted that they should in fact do so, meaning that Guyana now has a neighbor with a democratic mandate to invade and take more than half of their territory. Add to that the fact that they have these disputed borders with Suriname, and Guyana looks to be in a spicy situation, and I feel like, the question here is clearly, why would Venezuela want to do that? And the short answer is oil, but rather than just saying, look, there's a rogue state on the international stage, let's just say they're crazy and they're just doing unpredictable things. Let's actually try to understand Venezuela today and try to understand what's going on there, and indeed understand Guyana a bit better because it is one of the most interesting South American countries. You might assume that because it's in this region of the world that it has a decent population of probably white slash maybe indigenous people, and also that they speak a Latin language. However, it has a very tiny population of 800,000. They are English speaking for the most part, and if you look at the actual demographics, it's fascinating because overwhelmingly they seem to be East Indian people. What exactly is happening here? Let's talk about it in today's videos as we go into the borders, the demographics, and of course the internal divisions before talking about travel advice. And again, you might want to travel soon. It looks like there might not be too much of a country soon, but why is that? Let's explain in borders. Today, we are going to be talking about one of the most divisive issues in the world, and we are going to be taking an opinion on who gets to own which bit of land. And so in the same way that if you're going to work on a building site, you need to wear a hard hat and you need to wear a safety high visibility vest, I think in the same way, if you're going to be redrawing the borders in a part of the world you've never been to, there's only one appropriate outfit, and let me get it on right now. There we go. I feel much more qualified to do what I'm talking about right now. So with that said, Guyana is a country in South America that borders three others. Brazil, whom it has a very drama-free relationship with, by the way, mostly because they don't really have too much to talk about, but their border is separated very easily by natural frontiers, mostly this river right here. There are no issues about this, and this is why rivers are so great to separate countries. There is water and there is land on one side that's one country. There is land on one side that is another country. It works great for everyone, and this is exactly what they wanted to have worked out, because again, there's a very drama-filled border with Venezuela, but it's what they wanted to have worked out with Suriname, who, fun fact, used to be part of the same colony. There is one colony that used to be Guyana, Suriname, and French Guiana, and obviously, this was split into three separate European countries: the English, which let theirs part go independent as Guyana, the Dutch, which let their part go independent as Suriname, and the French, which let their part go independent, and I'm just kidding, this is still, legally speaking, a part of France. This is the biggest EU national park, fun fact. And also, my favorite map of South America. You better believe the number of Eiffel Towers by South American country is one right here, because legally speaking, this is France, which is also why I assume the Vox map of colonial influence around the world refers to this as Europe. It sort of is, right? Anyway, so basically the two parts that interest us are French, or rather Dutch Guyana and English Guyana, and these two countries basically came to a really easy agreement that the logical place to separate their territories would be the river right over here. And that is something that is easy to do. It's a very, very big river, especially close to the ocean where their colonies were, and so they just said, yeah, follow the river right up to the source. That can be our border. They agreed it, they signed treaties, and everything was fine until they realized that when you follow the border inland, something fun happens, which is that it splits in a nice T-junction. The English believe that the border should go this way, and indeed Google Maps seems to agree with them, whereas the Dutch clearly agreed that the source of the river is on this new river right over here, and they think that the border should go all the way up here towards its logical source, or at least where it meets the border of Brazil, whereas the English clearly think it goes this way. And who is right on this one? I'm just gonna say that Google Maps clearly knows a thing or two, but in either case, this isn't a very big disagreement they have. It's over this huge triangle of land, but if you actually look at it, no one lives there, and it's also some of the lowest resolution satellite photography you can find on Google. At some point, maybe when they find oil, they can have a big fight over this, but for the most part, Guyana and Suriname are coming to peaceful agreement about who should be in control of this, which is something a bit different to their issue with Venezuela. So Venezuela, I guess for the tiniest bit of background for someone who somehow doesn't know, is sitting on the world's largest oil reserves. Genuinely, that is, it's not like being a little, hyperbole. It's extremely filled with dead dinosaurs, and that is something you should keep in mind, because yeah, they had a bit of a socialist revolution where they decided, you know what, I don't like that there are foreign companies coming in here making oil. That oil should belong to the people, and so they actually could subsidize a lot of the living costs of their people. Indeed, there are all sorts of wild facts about what was free in Venezuela when they took the national oil company into national hands. However, the money has gone into interesting places since there. If you are, the long story short is the country hasn't been booming as hard as it did when it first nationalized the oil. And so, long story short, when they have maybe some issues, they relook at some old dispute they had, because Venezuela was never really happy with this border. This isn't something that's coming out of nowhere. I think like almost everything else in geopolitics, you can't just randomly argue, I should have this. You have to go into the history books and find a good reason why that argument is true. And so to give you the brief history of Guyana, they had a very long issue with their neighbors. So the brief timeline on this area, which represents the difference between the border between current Venezuela and current Guyana, and the border which Venezuela believes should be true, which cuts over most of the country, goes all the way back to 1899. It goes over 100 years back. As you can see, in 1899, the agreement was so bad that they actually hired a lobbyist to go to Washington to try and get an international arbitration tribunal and to work out, without people from either side who are biased, to work out who it should belong to. However, they awarded the area to Britain, which at the time was a colonial power ruling over Guyana, or British Guyana. They were not happy with this, and they said, no, that's not fair. And so they agreed with Britain, just before they left British Guyana, to establish a commission made up of representatives of Guyana, as well as Venezuela, to revisit the territorial dispute. They couldn't come to a resolution on who should own it, and so after 2015, the US oil giant ExxonMobil discovered some huge reserves of oil. They all of a sudden got a little bit spicy about things, and so Guyana took the case to the International Court of Justice, another tribunal panel, to basically try and work out, like, okay, let's get a legal international ruling on this. And the ICJ took years to work out that it even had the jurisdiction to decide. It decided it did have the jurisdiction, and then Venezuela says, you know what, we're gonna listen in case you guys rule in favor of us, but we're gonna keep going up to this court, but we're also not going to acknowledge you as being in control, just in case you say no. Basically, Venezuela is taking the stance that this land, no matter what any other international body says, is theirs. They believe it is theirs, and anyone who says otherwise is a Western imperialist. And honestly, if you are, again, to try and play a little bit on their side, because I think it's so easy for people from Western countries, especially capitalist Western countries, to just immediately come against Venezuela. So from their side of view, indeed, a lot of I've tried to read as much into this I can. This is effectively ExxonMobil who are trying to get the claim over this land put in Guyana's favor. Exxon has found a huge amount of oil, which they will get a large percentage of. They have to pay a percent to the Guyana government, so Guyana wants it too, but there is a big US company that is in the area, and the only reason they're not getting a lot of it right now, or a lot more of it, is because they're worried that one day that stuff might be taken. Indeed, ExxonMobil in particular was the big company which Venezuela once overthrew to take the people's oil. They did not compensate them for anything, and they're very upset about this. And from Venezuela's perspective, they got the evil oil imperializers out of their country and gave it back to the people. And so they're looking to do the same thing in Guyana, which is why that big company wants to do it. This is not Guyana going to the International Court of Justice and inflaming tensions. It is a big company. And so the most leftist version of this I could find is that actually ExxonMobil wants to start a war in South America. It is clear that Venezuelans who came to cast their vote are actually voting not on a conflict between Venezuela and Guyana, but instead on a conflict between ExxonMobil and the people of these two Latin American countries, which is an interesting take for, it's indeed, he said there's some pretty interesting takes in here, but they're basically trying to say this is a bad deal for Guyana. Guyana is giving up a lot of their oil to some foreign country. We need to go in and we need to save that. And obviously we'd make it a part of our country and we'd take the oil ourselves. But those are all messy details that come second. And it's crazy because these are very, very left-leaning sources, but that is the problem with conflicts that get to this level. At a certain point, you start to see big big company as being bad, or, big country or government or whatever being bad, to the point where you're willing to ignore facts to start to support your worldview. And I don't doubt that Nicolas Maduro, who is the president of Venezuela, is a much smarter man than like, oh yeah, actually this is, he has found the justification to distract attention away from his current, domestic economy, away from all of the things that are going wrong, by saying, actually, it's not, again, it's not us that are doing badly, it's the big US corporations, big country bad. And again, because there's a funny thing, once you become leader of a government, how do you continue, once as you crawl through the ranks, you can always blame someone bigger than you. The reason I'm not doing well is because of bigger YouTube channels. And if it's not that, it's because of YouTube themselves. But if I become the CEO of YouTube, I have to be like, oh, the reason I'm doing terribly is it's the state government. And then if I become the leader of the state government, it's like, oh no, it's the reason I'm still doing terribly and I'm sad is because of the US as a whole. And then I blame the UN, and you can keep finding a higher authority to blame. And Venezuela, given that they've had a rule by the people for so long, they need to find people to blame. And that is how I would see things. From Guyana's perspective, it is their neighbor trying to inflame tensions because they found a very, very valuable resource, which they really, they feel as though that's not very okay. And I actually I do see on the one hand why it is that you'd be skeptical of a foreign country coming into your country and controlling your resources. But I also would say that actually, I think invading a country to solve that is never the answer. I used to think, looking at the world and see, like anyone who looks at Ukraine and Russia picks an obvious winner or picks an obvious good guy to them, and then they're confused by people agree otherwise. Everyone who looks at the Middle East are like, yeah, there's the good guys that I agree with and the bad guys. And in the case of Venezuela, the good guys and the bad guys are very clear to everyone who doesn't share the Venezuelan government's viewpoint, which is that, yeah, actually, the whole world is run by big evil companies propped up by the US government so they can extract money from our countries so they can enjoy their fancy way of life. And ultimately, maybe if you just do some bad stuff to them, it doesn't matter who suffers. Sure, you might have to kill a few Guyanese soldiers, you might have to really kill a lot of your fellow South American brethren, but wouldn't it be worth it to shove it to some oil company? They would have a negative report on their profit and loss statement this year if we did that, and isn't that worth lots of people dying? And it's crazy when you really get to that level, but that is where I believe people are at with this. This is my personal take, of course. But with that said, I think the interesting thing about Guyana is the fact that between its two territorial disputes, it really doesn't have much of a country if they were to both go against them, right? You can see just how thin and narrow the country is here, something we could explain a bit more as we talk about the internal borders. Here are the provinces of Guyana. As you can see, they are very, very large when you get far away from the capital, and then they're very small as you get in. In fact, one of the weirdest shaped provinces is East Berbice Cotonin, which, as you can see right here, covers a ridiculous amount of area, but despite that, very few people live in any of these, and here, and here, and here, and here. The majority of the population is instead found in the few provinces right by the Atlantic Ocean. Indeed, with Georgetown being the capital and Triumph, the province around it, having a majority of the population, or rather a plurality of the population, the majority of people living in Guyana live right by the ocean. As you can see, it is ridiculous how dense the country is here and how nothing the country is otherwise. Indeed, I really do think that when you look at the population of Guyana, which is just 800,000, it makes it one of the lowest populated countries for one that is actually quite big. And so the fun fact I figured would be worth diving into is if we look at the world population density map, where the most dense country, the full country, is Monaco at 18,000 people per square kilometer, and Singapore at 8,000 people per square kilometer. Guyana is all the way at the bottom, just above, in terms of actual sovereign states, Mongolia, Namibia, Australia, Iceland. Then it's Guyana at 4 people per square kilometer. That is not to say only 4 people live per square kilometer in most of the country. That is to say everyone lives here, and then 0 people live in the majority of the rest of the country. Seriously, 0 people per square kilometer. And when you look on Google Maps, that becomes incredibly obvious. And so the country is basically administered as a couple of settlements on the coast that own a lot of land inland. And, it's like, there are some real, it's interesting to look at the actual capitals and realize there are some real villages. Like, yeah, look, there are lots of people who live in Guyana here, but it's also insane to realize that the distance from, say, Lefem, actually, what are the driving directions from Lefem to Georgetown? Which, by the way, fun fact about, okay, let's take it all the way into Georgetown over there. It's an 11-hour drive to do 552 kilometers, which is, it sounds not too bad, but that includes a river as well. You have to go through police control, which is interesting. But yeah, if you do that, you can be in the capital to the very edge of the country. So it's not a huge country, but it is a lot of nothing in this country. Speaking of a lot of nothing, one of the most famous facts about Guyana, besides having the most generic name for its capital and one of the most interesting looking capital cities, by the way. Look, we got some Google Maps in here. Let me show you what it looks like. Very, very, very interesting place, right? Vibes South American, but then everything is just in English. Italian gelato ice cream, Royal Castle chicken. To me, this is crazy. I find this to be one of the most fascinating parts of the world. Look at this over here. Jogsuku new store, top-notch auto sales. Okay, I could do this forever. But what I could also do forever is mention that Guyana has one of the other most famous events in the world. Besides, the first country to just vote on annexing their neighbor and maybe looking like they're doing it because, they're amassing troops at the borders. They're building airports along the border. It's a scary time to be if you're a Guyanese. But the other thing that's interesting about this is the fact that one thing you might not know is that Guyana, famously, is the site of the Jonestown Massacre. 900 people of the People's Temple religious sect, led by Jim Jones, decided to kill themselves. And honestly, that is a staggering fact by itself. If you've ever looked into the Jonestown Massacre, I recommend not doing it if you haven't, but if you ever look into it, it's fascinating because that is a large number of people anywhere in the world, but it represented 0.1% of Guyana's current day population, which, fun fact, is even more than it used to have, because let's dive into the demographics. Why is it that so few people live in Guyana? The answer is this population pyramid. People die very, very young in Guyana, and if you actually look at the from this map before, you can see that the majority of people are actually Indian immigrants. This is very, very fascinating because when it comes to the discourse around, oh yeah, well when is it okay to invade a country and when is it okay to commit big acts of brutality, the word people keep throwing around is colonialism or settler colonialism, but this is not a white country. No one is white. I mean, in the 0.5% of people, there are some white people, but there is a small indigenous community. There is a, fairly big, black community, and no one argues they are the colonizers, right? And there's a lot of mixed race people that are some mix of those, and then East Indians make up a large part of it. Obviously, the reason why is something, moving people around, not slave trade, but, servitude after that. But still, the fact that this leads to one of the most fascinating breakdowns for a country is really cool, in my opinion. And when you look at the population pyramid, you'll realize that, yeah, a lot of those people not only have been born recently, but also they die very, very young. There's a nice gender balance in the country, I guess, but the fact that, we were just talking about Dr. Congo, who had, what was it, like 20 million people born in the last 5 years, the Guyana, who have the largest share of their population being 0 to 5, had just 80,000 people being born in the last 5 years. That's nuts, right? Indeed, their population does show signs of low birth rates that will lead to decline, but you can see that right here, their population has been fairly steady, and at least isn't going drastically down right now, but there is the demographic crisis that's going to come for us all. It's happening in Guyana too. And so, yeah, I think the actual, crisis in Guyana is mostly down to, will Venezuela overstep the line? Will they come and do a thing? If they did, it is almost certain, by the numbers, that they would be successful if they're willing to deal with the international sanctions. In fact, is it just international sanctions? Is invading another sovereign country actually a valid enough reason for, big military powers to get involved? These are the questions I think people will be asking themselves. And yeah, I think the only logical thing I can say is if you're British right now, your Prime Minister, your Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and you're looking and there's a big crisis in South America where someone wants to invade a former British territory. Going in there and defending it, I mean, defending South America is the only thing that has saved failing conservative governments in the past. And so maybe, or faltering I guess I should say, maybe just maybe, if you're looking at a way to boost your numbers, that's a way. However, if you're an individual British citizen, like I am, and you're looking to visit Guyana before it becomes much smaller, how should you do so? Well, I asked the UK government, as I do for all of these videos. They said something about Guyana being actually fairly trouble-free. Crime levels are high, so take sensible precautions. Obviously, watch out for people following you home from the airport. But something which is fun is almost every country on the British Travel Advice website says there is an extreme risk, a heightened risk of terror, watch out. But here it just says, actually, there's no recent history of terrorism in Guyana. They can't be ruled out, but you're probably fine, which I think is fun. I was looking forward, by the way, to going through Germany. They have a Euro 2024 section. There's going to be a whole fun thing. I haven't seen that on a website before. But instead, let's learn about how we can stay safe. Crime levels are high, police capacity is low. That's bad. Many crimes in Guyana are common to countries with wide gaps in wealth. And, you know, all foreigners are wealthy, so muggings happen in broad daylight, at gunpoint or knife point. Burglary and theft from cars is commonplace. You know, it sounds like a good visit to San Francisco to me. Don't drive on the road. Okay, yep, San Francisco. Air flying. You know, everything here sounds exactly like what I'm expecting, and so with no issues whatsoever. Vodafone and O2 are in. Wow, that's actually really weird, huh? What an interesting little place this is. And indeed, if you want to go, what do you need? I think you'll find no visa, 30 days to remain in Guyana, and so yeah, I'm looking forward to visiting. Or alternatively, one of my things, I know this is a weird thing to care about, but I keep track of which countries I've been to, which ones I haven't. You might be familiar with that. Would you like to see my updated map? Because I've been to a new Spanish province. I don't know why Spain is divided on this map and not other countries, but we'll just accept it. I've been to the very southern one, which I feel like I should know. Looking at the map, I feel like it's Galicia. I feel like it's Galicia. I'm pretty sure it's... Oh, no, that's not. Andalusia. Galicia is the one over here. So I went to Andalusia recently, and so I can tick it off my new fun travel map. And so, yeah, the interesting thing about this map, right, is if you want to visit every country, there's two solutions. You can go to every country, including the ones you really probably shouldn't go to, or you can just wait for their neighbors to invade them. I mean, those are your solutions. And indeed, you know, if French Guyana ever goes independent, they'll screw over my entire plan. So, yeah, maybe what I should actually be doing is taking off my British, my British vest, put on my leftist hat for a second. You know, I believe that we should just solve all our problems by thinking about them real hard. And what I should instead say is, you know what, Venezuela? If you're gonna take this region of Guyana, take it all. Do me a favor while you're at it. Okay, is this an okay thing to do? Advocate for war for personal reasons? Well, it's what everyone on the internet's doing, so I guess I'm getting on board with it. Thank you for watching today's thing. We have been having fun recently with the we're doing like very slight edits on the country bull thing. Let me know if you've been enjoying it. There's a few decisions that I'm kind of like taking here and there, but the fun thing about this A to Z and doing a video every day is you know, this quick opportunity to change and evolve. So for example, no more outros. Hope you appreciate that, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow for H. I have only one country I can name that starts with H, and so I think it's going to be that one. But we'll have to see when we get there. For now, very sad that we couldn't talk about Ghana, or Gabon, or indeed Germany. But maybe next time. There won't be a next time. Second channel, don't care. Goodbye.